Welcome to Voice Talks. This is Zach, your host, and today I bring you an interview with Shawn Christensen, a Swiss-American tenor I went to school at Mannes with. We both studied with Arthur, and I'm very excited for this episode today because when we both entered Mannes, we, had nice voices, but we didn't really know how to tackle notes above the staff and through the passaggio and into our high notes. And we were both sort of figuring this out at the same time. And so I'm really excited to share this interview with him because we got a chance to really delve in what it's like to discover high notes, wrestling with the question, am I a baritone? Am I a tenor? And, showing that persistence will get you to where you want to be, and showing exactly what he did to discover those high notes. And obviously, as tenors, I talked about with Chris last time, you're sort of paid to sing like 5 notes as a tenor, and if those aren't secure and consistent, then you might start looking at other repertoire. So Shawn is really doing some good stuff with his voice. He's been described as a large, dark-hued tenor voice. He sang Don Ottavio with Williamsburg Opera to great acclaim. He just finished his time at Sarasota Opera, and so I start to get his input on what he thinks of the industry and his experience down there, and why that's a stepping stone into his professional career and what he'll be doing next. So first, just to get a sense for the color and hue of Shawn's voice, it's very unique. He's partial to the darker hued tenors and sings in a really nice way, while maintaining agility and while maintaining a beautiful line. So we will get the chance to listen to Don Ottavio's aria Il mio tesoro from Don Giovanni, and so here it is. Check it out. on to the interview. So, what are you working on right now? Where are you?
So, right now I'm in Sarasota Opera. At Sarasota Opera, and I'm doing...
So cool.
Yeah, it's actually much cooler than I expected. Because...
I love that opera house. I love that town. Like, it's a good place to be. Really envious.
Yeah, I mean, it's... well, so first, like, when I first got it, that's actually, it was a really good audition for me, because I had just gotten back. I did Chautauqua last summer, which went well, but, I met somebody there who kind of helped me with certain technical things. I mean, I can talk about that a bit later. And I've just sort of been trying to change a few things, and so this audition was sort of like my first foray into, after having changed some things, and it worked out really well. The main guy is the director of the program is called Victor Dorenzi, and he's this super intense, very, very passionate guy who has no filter whatsoever. So he's like super. He can be very mean. I mean, he can be very tough and upfront about problems that singers have, and we've seen that a couple times already here working. But I mean, I made a good impression, and I got offered one of the apprentice positions. An apprentice being like the lower tier, and then there's studio above. Yeah, it's a great program, and I wasn't really expecting it because I was a little disappointed. I was just gonna do the chorus so right now we're doing a pretty fucking a very kick-ass. You want me to do that again?
No, doesn't matter. Don't worry about it.
We're doing a really kick-ass season. We're doing Aida, we're doing Fidelio, Così, and another Verdi opera called Battaglia di Legnano.
Yeah, I know that one.
Oh, great. Yeah,
that's great.
It's cool because the company is actually finishing its Verdi cycle, where they've literally done every work by Verdi. So this is they're finishing with Aida, basically, which is, the coolest opera ever. I mean, right now, we started with that. We're on stage right now for that. There are about 60 of us, 60 young artists, and there's about 2/3 apprentices, and 1/3 studio artists who are the higher tier. And the reason it's good is because I don't know, it's just they're really passionate about Verdi. They're really passionate about music in general. They're very hard. They work us hard, but they're very they're also really chill in a different way. I mean, it's I was offered a cover, which is cool because they reserve a couple of the covers before after people arrive. It's just sort of take a
for the messenger and
Aida? No, yeah. So Aida is one of them, and another tenor was offered that cover, but I was offered Giacchino in Fidelio.
Oh, very nice.
Who's a secondary tenor, but it's actually kind of a nice role.
No, I mean, when I was interviewing Chris last time, he sang the messenger for a night in Aida sing through, and he was saying, sort of cliche, but there are no small roles. There are just small performers. So you pretend that it's a main role and you
absolutely. And actually, the messenger is actually not easy. It's just one line, but you just got to be super present. You got a lot of orchestra under you. It's definitely very the guy who's doing it here is very good. He's good. I mean, the whole cast is great. Definitely. Our director, Victor Dorenzi, is definitely has a high standard for excellence. He doesn't really tolerate. I mean, he really respects the golden years of singing, and he really feels that's sort of faded. From the time of Caruso up to about 10 years after World War II. Where this huge crop of amazing singers just came out of that conflict in a way, Corelli and all those guys. who are just really kick-ass. And actually he made me really delve back into archives to start listening to those people more than the people who are alive today. Just kind of try to get a link to the past.
Yeah.
And inform our performance that way.
So, so to keep things, so what I really want to do with this podcast is keep it technical.
Yeah.
And it's sort of serious, I guess, but in that it's not like we're sitting around making jokes of opera headlines or something like that.
No, for sure. And I wouldn't really be able to do that because I'm...
Yeah, that's not my personality. I mean, I can be mean, but I can't.
No, but I mean, I also don't follow it that much. I mean, I'm pretty busy with what I'm doing right now, and
yeah, exactly.
And technique is most of what I'm thinking about these days.
Good. So I figure that's the case, and it seems to be the case with all the young artists. All the professional singers who are our age, getting their career started. I sort of sent you the little spiel I had, but the singers are the hungriest of singers, and also their technical journey where they maybe have only just figured things out or are currently figuring things out is very recent. So the bad taste in your mouth from poor experiences is still fresh, I'm sure. So and I really want to talk about maybe not those bad experiences performing or whatever, but the trials you went through in order to get your voice to where it is today. That's really what I want to delve into, because I think you can have master classes, you can have master teachers, you can speak with veterans of the art, and they've been doing the same thing for so many years. They're masters of their art form, but they've been doing the same thing for so many years that I think sometimes the perspective of someone singing really, really well at this age is more unique. It's not that it's more valuable, it's just a different than what we're used to hearing all the time from the masters. And I think that it's a perspective we don't always... I think it deserves the same amount of respect. It's sort of like, they're two different ways of looking at something, from the back side of life, from the front side of life. And
And the ideal person in that is someone who is still a performer and still learning, but also giving master classes.
Yeah, exactly.
Ideally, because it's true that I don't usually react well, or I'm very convinced in master classes, because it's often like a kind of a showmanship thing, especially if there's an audience, and it's often like, oh well, if you do this, then just do that, and why don't you do that, and then it'll fix your problem. And it's some of it is valid, but to me, I think a masterclass at its best should be an introduction to more work that should be done. That like, well, somebody who's a very good teacher could be like, well, why don't you try that? Okay, well, it might have some good result now, but in order to really incorporate it, you're gonna have to work with that idea. And would you be interested in, like, why don't we meet just the two of us and try to really get down into that? And that's to me that's a better application of master classes. I think when I love Joyce DiDonato, but her master classes are very much more like acting oriented, and and that definitely helps. Sorry, I just need to plug in. That definitely helps. But I think right. So let's go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, and to speak on, well, we're unique in that we're tenors, and say what you want comparing the different voice parts, but there's there's no doubt in anyone's mind that to sing tenor is sort of the most unnatural of all the vocal ranges.
Absolutely, so, and there are young tenors who definitely have a very specific niche within the tenor range, and I think specifically of legeros and people who have a very natural ability to sing high. But I think when we're talking about the difficulty of being a tenor, it's usually because what we're doing is fairly unnatural, whereas a lot of voice types sing in their natural range, especially baritones, especially basses, and sopranos, I think, as well. Because it's
well,
such a...
yeah, I would say sopranos because, you know, they sing in their head register 85 to 95% of the time versus
Although
tenors.
it's funny here, which is really fun actually, like our director really pushes for chest voice for the women. He really goes like break into chest voice, be honest about it. And it sounds really badass, honestly. Like an Aida, Amneris is fucking badass. Like she's...
Yeah, well...
And then the singer we have it's a really cool role. But yeah, no, it's true that it's definitely interesting to follow tenors in like their 20s, I think, because there's definitely some of them get it down pretty quickly. Some of them, I think most of them, takes a good decade to figure out. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely still figuring it out.
Yeah, but even from, you know, so even from when we started, both of us had, you know, we were right in the middle of figuring it out. And from when, looking back at your voice, my observation of your voice, from when you started Manus, at least when we started to go to school together, it was, how do we tackle high notes? How, you know, what are we supposed to do now that we have to sing above the staff? You know, we've gone through undergrad and we could sort of do the art song thing, you know, make our way up to A's or something like that. But what do we do above that? And since then, you know, at least the recordings you have on SoundCloud, the performances that I heard you in, at least at the end of our Manus career, were really, you were doing some really nice things coming together. So I really... how about you just sort of start at the beginning of your musical training, whether it was another instrument, something like that, and see if you can take us through, you know, your singing foundation, and then I'll sort of guide you along and your progression, and as we move through Manus and studying with Arthur, and then what you've done since studying with Arthur. Are you still seeing Arthur when you're back in New York? Yeah. Great. Be sure and tell him hi for me.
I will.
Yeah.
I will. He's doing fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've been singing for a while. I think the more formative parts of that were before college, when I started singing more solo work, mostly in musical theater and things like that. I only really started to think of singing seriously. I don't remember ever thinking technically in those years. I think I really started to approach singing from a technical standpoint when I got to college. I went to Bard College for my undergrad, and I met in my first year I sort of like, you know, joined the chorus, and I had like a few lessons with another teacher, and then this man Rufus Muller, who's a tenor who actually still performs nowadays. He does a lot of oratorio work. And he heard me singing, and he was like, well, you know, you should come and have a few lessons with me. And basically what came out of that relationship was that I really got to get more in touch with my potential and to try and project myself into the future. I mean, I can't say that I ever really knew what I was getting into when I decided that I wanted to be a singer. I don't think anybody really does. And I'm lucky that I didn't have too many obstacles in my way that would have prevented me from pursuing this, namely family, namely money. I mean, I'm definitely lucky to still be doing it. And I mean, this is not to diminish my own efforts that I've put into it, my concentration, my ambition, but I am definitely grateful. And I don't like it when people continually say that they're grateful for something, but I am grateful that I'm able to do it and put as much effort that I can put into it. So after in undergrad, I sort of got in touch with my true voice, or a sound that was very different from my speaking voice, because it involved opening up my resonant space, really like making more space to resonate and to get in touch with what I consider to be like your true timbre, like your true sound. And I think that's hard. It's hard to find. I think a lot of tenors even professional ones don't necessarily find it the way I would consider your most beautiful sound. I mean, and then again, that depends of what kind of voice type you're heading to. But I definitely am partial to darker, more baritonal tenors. I mean, I really like Jonas Kaufmann's work. I really like Corelli, and I really like Pavarotti. I mean, even Pavarotti, I think you could argue, has a fairly dark tone.
I think I agree with you. I think it's sort of the Italianate style, of singing through a low laryngeal space with a high soft palate and blending the chiaroscuro. It's sort of to the opposite of Peter Pierce, basically. So wanting to incorporate this speech-like human relationship to the sound, no matter how high you go, to be able to have it be relatable, to not have the higher you sing have it be so jarring and different from, it should be a beautiful, natural sounding thing, regardless of how unnatural it may be. So.
Yeah, and that's the difficulty, is that you're going for one voice. You're going for one continuous voice throughout the tonal spectrum. But you can't do that without accepting that you're going to have to actually make changes as you go up through the spectrum. That the idea is that the end product, or the surface of your voice, should be uniform. But I think underlying that is a lot of technical readjustment, as what we would call registers, what we would call the passaggio. And you hear it in singers when there's small modifications that are happening. But again, the end result is to have one voice, is to have...
Yeah, to sort of hide those technical things, is what you're saying, from the audience?
And not hide them actively, but rather work to link up all the gaps, sort of smooth out the... I would consider that the voice is just a series of registers, right? And like the difficulty is bridging the gap from one register to another. And also, I think... working on the quality of the sound in each register so that they all align. And I mean, that's still something that I'm trying to figure out, and like a lot of my work with Arthur was just doing exercises that would go, and I mean, of course, would be to just do exercises that go from the bottom registers to the top registers, and to not be afraid of getting that high, of bridging these gaps, and B, also just working on the quality of that sound. Right. So after Bard College, I mean, things were going well, but I mean, when I'm having a bad day, I've actually also, let me preface that by saying that we definitely live in a modern age where we're able to record anything easily, and ever since I first started taking lessons at Bard, I've been recording pretty much everything. And so I have on my computer I have an archive of myself, of every lesson I've ever taken, with like a few exceptions where I probably forgot my phone or just something went wrong with the recording. And when I'm having a bad day, I definitely go back and listen to some old recordings of lessons where it was pretty rough. Like it was, and that's when I say when I'm lucky, because somebody would definitely have had to have been very prescient and very trusting of the work that I could put into it, and or maybe I don't want to sell myself short. I mean, I'm sure there was a good sound, but technically speaking, it was very weak. It was very weak.
So let me ask you, what if you had to sort of pick one or two or three things, if there was one major technical issue you had when you were at Bard, what would you say that would have been?
Definitely the top. Definitely, and I'm not even talking about the extreme top. I'm talking about just G's, like G, and I mean, and still today I'm trying to do like the sort of mid to high register correctly. That, and definitely breath control, breathing correctly. I mean, I know I it's only recently in the past, I would say 6 months, that I've been thinking about breath beyond just, just take a breath. Like, and I know that a lot of it was not done correctly at the time. Yeah, so I would definitely say breath control. I would definitely say mid to high register, and how to negotiate the passaggio, how to go into it and how to exit the passaggio, because it's I mean, yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say. There are a lot of different factors were not being addressed, basically.
Those are probably the most critical, you'd say, though.
Yeah, I would say that I was singing too open in the passaggio. Basically, I wasn't covering in how I understand it today, which is a more a darkening of the space, opening in the back, and having a slight vowel modification as you go up.
Good. So okay. So now you're taking lessons with Arthur. First year at Manus. So you're taking lessons with Arthur, and so what does he address with you first? Is it these issues, seemingly, or does he sort of, what do you feel like you're tackling at first over your first year?
Well, so after Bard, I took a year off and I continued working with Rufus, but the limitation with Rufus was that he's not able to sing above, like he doesn't really sing high, like very high tenor stuff, or at least standard repertoire arias. He sings oratorio, which is Handel, which usually goes up to A's at most, because it's just a different technical age at that time. And so I really needed a different teacher. As much as he helped me a lot, I needed somebody to address high notes. And I mean, I found Arthur fairly randomly through one of his students who recommended him to me, and through him I applied to Manus, and that was the next 2 years of my life. So with Arthur, I mean, it really began with just with doing exercises that would make me more familiar with that part of my voice, of working the falsetto into it, of breaking from falsetto into chest, sort of understand the position of my larynx, of my voice when I'm singing in falsetto, and then to try and adapt that to chest voice, right? Because what we're doing here is trying to sing above a certain register without breaking into falsetto. We're trying to keep the chest connection up to C, basically, and that's the difficulty of the tenor voice, and that's why up until a certain point in history, everybody sang those high registers in falsetto, because that would have been the natural thing to do, and that's what's so unnatural about being a tenor. But I mean, my instinct at the time was to push and to use the same technique in the high registers that I would have used in the lower registers, and that's another difficulty, is that you have to give less. Actually, there's less air pressure involved, and you need to modify. And it's actually very hard for me to think about what I was doing first with Arthur, because it's only as I gained the knowledge of what I was doing wrong that. Or rather, what I should be doing right, that I understood what I was doing wrong. And that wasn't, in the beginning, I was just sort of being led by him. And that's, to his credit, that's definitely his way of teaching, is that he doesn't really tell you too much in the beginning. He's just like, well, no, just do that. Just don't think about it. And I mean, I'm sure you know a lot of singing, a lot of the teaching, a lot of the learning when we're trying to learn how to be better singers, is to not involve our brains too much in the beginning, because there's a lot of things that come in the way. Noah
Lindquist, who played for Bonnie's lessons, Arthur's lessons, and Ruth's lessons, at times referred to Bonnie and Arthur as sort of vocal ninjas. Like they would, vocal ninjas. They would trick their students into doing the right thing, and I think that's a mark of a good teacher. And then after they start to do the right thing, they would help us understand what it is we're doing, so that we're more aware of exactly what you're saying. And yeah, I think that part of the reason why they've been so successful as teachers is they get the results, but they keep those students who are even singing at the highest level coming back to them because they're just so good at getting that personal sound without any inhibitors, out of the singer. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, for sure. And Arthur did help me a lot. Just to kind of unify the voice. And I even remember I remember one lesson where I was like, oh, I'm finally singing like an A, like in Federico's Lament. I was working on that aria, and it was a rough time in the beginning, and slowly it got more polished. And I remember one lesson where I got it. I was like, oh no, that's how you do an A. And I remember listening to the lesson many years ago and being like, oh my god, got very emotional because it was finally. And today I listen to it and I'm like, my god, that's an awful A. God, that sounds bad. It's yeah. And that's a nice part is hopefully what should be a very consistent amount of progress. And actually in the past year, it hasn't been as consistent. I've definitely found myself liking my sound better a year ago than it is now, and I guess there comes a point where you have a bit of a diminishing return, right? You have a point where you start to be so technical that you might try a different thing at some point, and then it's easier to come back and try different things. You definitely have, as you progress, you get more and more tools to work with. You get a variety of things that you can apply to your sound, of different approaches, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, and it definitely helps to get an outside perspective at times.
Definitely. So let me ask you this. So when you were discovering these new registers in your voice, is there anything in particular that you were doing that allowed you to access that range, whether you were pushing or not, but you didn't have the notes before, and now you had the notes. So what process did you go through? Whether they were ugly notes, you started to gain access to this upper range. So was there anything you did in particular that allowed you to sort of go from the upper middle through the passaggio? Was there a specific vowel, a specific maybe exercise? Was there something that you would always go back to that would really help you just start working out that, getting yourself up there and coming down and getting yourself back up there, Because I know when I first sort of started to discover this with Arthur as well, I used oo, or I used like UH, really to keep me narrow and tall, and as you said, sort of opening up in the back, up through and up down, and that sort of allowed me to bridge.
Yeah, because those vowels are already covered naturally. Because you have the oo and the o, you already have a lowered larynx because your tongue is in the back, and you definitely have that space. And the difficulty is applying it to vowels like a and I and e, which are more closed in their natural placement. Yeah, I mean it was. It's definitely there are a lot of ways to get to it. In the beginning it was definitely falsetto and doing a lot of exercises where you would just start low and sing kind of like an alarm, like a fire alarm, a fire siren, and just kind of and then kind of appreciate that there's a break there, but to try and still keep that connection to the chest. Secondly, it was also giving less air pressure. I don't know. I mean, I think that everybody can make those sounds, even basses. I mean, I think it's a question of trusting that, of holding on, and of not breaking. I'm so in the thick of it these days that I think it's difficult for me to remember why I couldn't even access those kinds of things. But to me, it's definitely like it's definitely just it was hard to imagine how to sing with the same technique that I would use in my mid, how to sing in that same manner in the high registers, in the very high registers, because it was just, you had to accept that you had to give less, you had to be more controlled, you had to have a pretty constant air pressure, you had to give, like, you know, have a very stable diaphragm, and you had to have a very open space when singing up there. I mean, a lot of the exercises were really like linking the bottom to the top, or starting from the top and going down to the bottom, and just, you know, doing that in repetition in a safe environment, but definitely getting me to figure it out on my own in a way. And I think that's a misconception. Like, we should never assume that our teachers should show us everything, right? It's you know, like that Matrix quote, I can only show you the door, you know, you have to walk through it. Literally, like, you really, at some point I could tell that I was becoming more and more aware of my body and of my throat, and what it is I had to do to sing, and just to become more aware of what was happening in there. It's definitely a gradual process. I mean, as humans, we want to find events and pillars and moments that we can put in a history book and say, well, that's the day where I figured it out. And I think it feels that way sometimes, where you get it finally. But it's definitely a cumulative process. It's definitely a lot of work where you just need to get to know those muscles. You need to work on those nerve endings, and not just here, but like in your brain, like understanding, oh, well, if I do this and this, well, then I'll get that. It's definitely a long process, and I think that's why it takes so long for, especially tenors, because it's an unnatural thing, and it's a question of getting familiar with that part of your body and with those kinds of actions.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree. It's sort of like, you know, we don't use our voice that way at all, and then all of a sudden, we want to study this particular style of music, and then as we study it, we realize, oh shoot, we have to sort of relearn how to walk almost. You know, it's
absolutely
one of those things to understand.
Absolutely. And like, really what I've been working on recently is my passaggio and okay, my passaggio and my breath, and having those two be always working in conjunction, right? So that means,
what are your sort of, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so that means very specifically around D, around E flat, you have to start covering. And not always, like, you can do it for effect, but I think most of the time you need to start opening the back of your space and protect your voice from too much pressure, from too much tension. I would consider it a handoff from one muscle group to another. I have a friend who's a lot better versed in the names of the muscles. Cricothyroid, and the other one is arytenoid muscle, I think. Basically, it's like the
thyroarytenoid, I think, yeah.
Thyroarytenoid, that's right. Well, basically, it's the way I consider it is that you're handing off the work from one muscle to another. I just got a brain fart. What was I talking about? Right,
you're
passaggio.
talking about the, yeah. There you go.
Yeah, the passaggio. And so, like, there's definitely for me, you have to start entering that change in how you think of in what you do in your throat around D, all the way up to around G, A flat. I'm trying to figure out how to keep pushing it up to A. That's like, because then there's another, like, the exit of the passaggio to me is the next register, right? Is the extreme highs for tenors. And everybody's voice is a little different. I would say that some tenors, you can hear it when they sing B flats in their chest voice, basically, and you can hear it when they sing B flats in their head voice, right? Or in a much more mixed sound. Yeah. that's what I'm trying to figure out, is how to never compromise in that area of my voice, is to always be connected to your breath, and always protecting your voice on every vowel. And I noticed that, like, just by listening to tenors that I probably shouldn't be listening to, I tend to open too much, like on an E vowel. I would sing E as opposed to that kind of thing, and sort of readjusting that as you go higher and higher, you need to give more space, and you need to adjust for air pressure.
So about this concept of modification, which you mentioned before, you have to modify through the passaggio. So is there a specific direction you modify towards, a specific vowel you try to...
Definitely towards more open vowels. I mean, ideally you're always singing in an open throat, right? And it's only at the very edge of the nozzle, of the very edge of the apparatus, that you modify what the vowel is going to sound like. You're still singing A, but because you're higher in your register, it's still going to sound like A. But if you think A, then you're not going to be set up correctly for that kind of tension, that kind of air pressure, that kind of effort. I think that if you listen to Pavarotti, you have that, you can hear both sounds. You can both hear an open sound and a closed sound when he's on vowels that aren't oo, or things that are already covered. He definitely sounds like he has a very bright sound when he sings like ah, but his tongue is back, and like his throat is open, and he's really singing ah. It still comes out as ah to the audience, but what's happening in his throat is a lot more open. So vowel modification is a slippery slope, because in the end you still want the same sound to come out, and you can hear when people modify too much and they go straight to technique, and like if you have some knowledge of technique, then you can hear that in other people's voices. And really, I think the most impressive singers are those that appear to have no that appear to be completely seamless, even to a trained ear, and that's I think what impresses us as singers. But yeah, I mean, the slippery slope with vowel modification is that you have to do it from a technical standpoint. You can't just modify the vowel and expect. You do need to go at it from an understanding of why it is you're doing it, and that's really like the idea, is to open up your throat, to rely more on resonance rather than effort. The tenor who's doing Radames right now is a really good example of that, where he sounds like he's under-singing the entire time, like coasting throughout the whole roll. When we're in the rehearsal space, he sounds like he doesn't have a big voice, but as soon as we get to the stage, he's like relying purely on resonance. He's always like, he's never pushing, he's never overproducing. He's always relying on the resonance of his body and of his throat, even up into B flats, which sound small in a way, but are huge and still resonate and like are still very present. So yeah, that's another perk of being here and of being exposed to good singers.
We get to look down their throats basically while they're...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and definitely like go through the process and understand what you have to do to sing a role like Radames, which is very intense. Like I think there's like 15 B flats. Like you have to know what you're doing. Like you just can't do it if you don't have a technical understanding of how to give less, how to coast, when to give more.
Of course, yeah. Well, just the opening aria is some consider to be the most difficult spinto tenor aria in existence. It's because it's you're basically singing Il mio tesoro with high B flats in it, because you have all of those Fs the whole time, and it just sort of sits at F the entire aria, and then anyway, but. Exactly. You have to know what it is you're doing.
Yeah, and I've actually been using it as as an exercise, not even the B flats, just the beginning, to try and work on the line.
The
CHRISTENSEN?
Yeah, I was the recitative. That beginning, or just
no, just like
yeah.
As opposed to going ba 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 ba, which is and that's another thing that I've been trying to be active about, is to always have a vibrato going through the sound, to have a legato. Definitely helps with staying connected.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting thing to bring up. People tend to be polarized on vibrato. Either you think about it consciously, or you let it happen. How do you feel about vibrato?
I never had to think about it in the beginning. I thought I didn't have it, but I think it was always there. Sometimes I try and think about it more, and I definitely feel when I'm singing shallow with like a shallow tone. If I'm thinking that, it probably is because my vibrato isn't very present, or I'm not. I don't know. It's definitely something that I don't think too much about. I would think more about legato and staying connected to the sound. And it is a problem in a lot of singers that their vibrato is too wide or too slow. I remember a singer, a mezzo, who had who's a young singer, but she has like the widest interval in her vibrato. And I just didn't understand how somebody wouldn't have told her, and how she couldn't address it. And so that, I'm definitely not totally I don't necessarily understand how natural it is, how you can modify, I guess I'm trying to say that because personally I don't think I have a problem with my vibrato. I've never had to think further than just sing and let the natural oscillation of the voice come about, rather than trying to have to modify it because I was doing it wrong or naturally it didn't sound good. So I don't know if people who have a wobble need to address that, if they can address it, or if that's just the way it is. I think it's something that you can address because I can imitate them. If I feel like it is something that's just a bad habit, that if it's not pointed out, then you're not trying to actively fix it. But it's definitely, I don't know, I'm always very impressed when tenors have a very quick vibrato. That's I think Chris Colmenero talked about how he would try and adjust the speed of his vibrato. I think that's something that he was working on. I talked to him about that once, and that's definitely something that I've never really tried to work on. But
it's you can hear old singers do this, and I think a dramatic example of adjusting the speed of your vibrato for one's dramatic effect would be Jose Carreras, even in his younger days before he got sick.
I see. Yeah,
you can hear that he actually he adjusts the speed of his vibrato. I mean, there's no two ways about it.
As a dramatic effect?
I think so. Whether it was a conscious decision or more of a result of the dramatic feeling he was going for in that specific phrase, it happened, and it happened consistently, sort of in
he would do like a combination of singing and no going ah.
Yeah, exactly,
it's that kind of thing where absolutely, I can imagine that too.
Or I think of him as holding a high note where he starts and it gets faster and faster and faster to make it more exciting before he comes off of it, type of a thing. Or especially as he ends the note of a song, I'm thinking maybe Que Gelida Manina, the final Ti piaccia dir, and as he decrescendos, the vibrato speeds up, and it's a really beautiful effect. Renee Fleming does the same thing. Not all the time, not consistently, but I've heard tons of examples of her doing that. It's not a tenor specific idea, and Charles Milnes actually, you can hear his, so it's in all voice parts, and it's I think that there are certain X factors that a lot of the great singers have, and when you're technically at the point where you aren't thinking about certain things, whether they did this consciously or not, there are certain ideas like this, adjusting the speed of your vibrato for dramatic effect, to have a control of it to that extent where no matter what speed it is, it's never going to be a wobble, because it's a cyclical motion as opposed to an up and down motion.
Right. Right.
It's more of like this.
Right.
It doesn't matter how slow or how fast it gets. You can, it's just it's responding to your dramatic intent. Another idea would be deliberately singing sharp, or starting in tune and becoming sharp. That's another concept that exists. I don't know if you've ever thought about that before, singing sharp.
As a dramatic effect.
Yeah, or well, let's just sort of talk about there's a pitch. Let's say This is the pitch.
Right.
If your vibrato is going like this, you can sing right in the middle of the pitch.
Right.
You can sing just under the pitch, so you're touching the pitch on the top part of the oscillation, or you can sing like this, where you stay on top of the pitch.
Yeah.
And I think Chris is very vocal, for example, about deliberately singing on top of the pitch in all of his
But
vowels.
I would argue that you can, right, if this is your vibrato, right, that it doesn't have to be that you can. I think that if you were actually singing above the pitch, I think that you would sound sharp, as opposed to if you kept the trough low enough, the valley, the trough valley, I forget. Basically,
it's
if you kept the
peaks and valleys, or peaks and
valleys, right?
Yeah.
So if you kept the valley a little bit under the pitch, but the peak went a little higher, then I think that would be considered more brilliant, rather than sharp, right? So that you have a more like high riding sound, and that's.
I agree, but I think at the same time the trick there is you don't want your vibrato to be wide.
To be too wide, absolutely.
So
I agree.
So Chris is vocal about it because he's discovered and has maintained the opinion that great singers, especially tenors, you can hear them sing sharp on high notes. Especially in ensemble work, it's a way that you don't have to push to be heard. That if you're just a hair sharp, you're going to be heard, and it doesn't translate as sharp. It translates as right and exciting. I think it's a really interesting point because I have heard it before myself, and I do agree that it's you're not singing sharp. It's just having an awareness that you aren't going to be living in the valley. You're going to be more living in the upper middle of the mountain. Absolutely. I think so.
The word for me would be brilliance. Would be like
exactly.
Would be sort of that shiny quality to the sound.
I think so.
Yeah,
too. And of course, you can push it too. And Chris has said he's also, he's had rehearsals where people have just said, "You are singing so sharp." It's a problem, and so he's he's like, that's fine. I'm thinking about that, and so I tone it back a little bit. You can obviously push anything too far, and I just think it's a really interesting concept to address it head on rather than to have it to be it's one of those sort of X factor things if it's ingrained in you. Technically, I think it's for example, I would equate the word brilliance with more lyrical or even legato singers. But when you have, for a tenor, for example, when you have someone like Kaufman or Giuseppe Giacomini, they sing with brilliance, and I think it probably reflects the intonation, as you say. I would say. that, you know, it's just an interesting thing to think about. It's such a small thing, but it can have a large impact, and to train your ear to, I don't know, I've been, you know, after talking about it with Chris, it's been something that I've thought about a lot, and it's sort of like, you know, I don't know exactly how I feel about it, but I'm clearly exploring the ideas in my head.
Yeah, no, and that's definitely something that I might try out myself.
Yeah.
I can't say that.
Listen for it. Listen to people.
Yeah,
you know, listen to Pavarotti and listen for it. Listen to Björling. Do you listen to Björling?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Björling, I think, does it all over the place, and Corelli definitely, especially if you listen to him, you know, at the end of the Romeo aria, on those B flats, as another, you know, we talk about, or I mentioned, speeding your vibrato as you decrescendo, but also speeding your vibrato as you, or getting sharp as you decrescendo as well. It's an interesting. It just sort of, you know, keeps it on that, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I never thought to think of it. It's just you hear those notes and you're like, oh my God, it's brilliant, you know. But I thought that was an interesting point to then go back and listen to some of those recordings, and I think it's definitely valid. So,
and that definitely reflects a lot of the technical things that we do that then read as natural,
exactly,
or that come across as the X factor, or things that, you know, like are oh my God, I can't explain how he does it, kind of thing.
Exactly.
Which, yeah, it's definitely all very controlled. There's a lot to be said about then letting go of that in performance. That's personally one of my difficulties, for sure, is to try and not think about technique when I'm singing. Well, because it's yes and no, because you should be thinking about it, but not obsessing over it, right? It should be like present, well, you know, like, oh well, now I'm going to do this and this, but there has to be room for drama. There has to be room for the text. That's another thing that I really like here. The director Sarasota really pushes for transmission of text, right, of meaning, of theater, because really that's what it is. And it shows in the performance that he picks, the actors really that he picks, because the woman who's doing Amneris is just a phenomenal actress, and that's the nice thing about this house also, is that it's fairly small. It's like a medium-sized house, and to me I think that's what opera should sort of be performed in that kind of more intimate setting. Happens a lot in New York and like those small companies, you know, like Loft Opera, Bear Opera, all those little startups. Really, they're like startups. To come back to a more intimate connection. I mean, nothing beats the Met for sure, and it's like bombast, and it's like it's grandiose aspect, but sometimes it's a little alienating. It's a little disconnected, especially on the acting side of things, I think.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
You kind of miss out on facial cues, which give a lot more depth to the sound, actually. You know, like if when Amneris loses, when she, you know, when Radames is about to be indicted, to be judged by the priest because he betrayed his country, you know, she's like proud. She's like, well, then why don't you just go and die? Basically, like, you don't want to defend yourself. I love you, but you don't want to. And he's like, yes, I don't want to live anymore. And she's like proud, and like right as he leaves, she breaks down, you know, because she's like she can't really be honest to what she just said, like, because she really doesn't care. She just wants him, and that happened a couple nights ago, and that was really poignant, because you could see her face, her losing that mask, where she can't take it anymore, you know, and she just like breaks down, and cries. And you could get that from 60 meters away or however far you are when you're in the nosebleed section in the Met. It's just not the same, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. It's unique. It's almost, would you say it's sort of like a European sized opera house?
Yeah, and I think the theaters in Europe are smaller. There's some huge ones, of course, but if you in Italy, all those little theaters were very, very intimate, and which means that the acting component was a lot more prevalent, a lot more important.
Let me ask you about the text, to keep it, as a tenor discussion on high notes.
Right.
Do you adjust how you? I know you adjust. You have to modify vowels, of course. The way that you sing, the way that you pronounce a word in the top of your range is not how you would pronounce the word if you were speaking it. So,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, for example, Romeo's aria, right? The word is pare, but if we go pare, that doesn't work, right? It's difficult to explain because I think a lot of us do it just because it's how people do it, it's how we're taught. For me, it has to do with resonance and just the frequency of the sound, right? I mean, it's difficult to really go into a pure physics part of it, like how sound works in a space. But my understanding of it is because it's at a different pitch, it's at a much higher pitch, you're going to have to adjust the space in which it resonates. And it seems that the wider, the bigger the space, the more economical, the more you can be about your breath, the less you need, right? Because you're relying less on pure air pressure and more on having the most efficient usage of that energy, of that air. So if you're going for pare, that's a much tighter position. There's less space, quite simply because the tongue is high and you're not freeing up space for sound waves to propagate. If you bring your tongue down and you go pare, immediately your jaw drops, your back of your tongue is lower, your larynx is lower, the entire space is enlarged. People talk about soft palate, that's right in the back. If it rises, then you're given even more space. I mean, technically speaking, that makes sense to me. Its execution, the execution of it is difficult because, and that's why people just go for vowel modification, because rather than addressing larynx goes low, soft palate goes up, side of the mouth goes out. If you're just saying well, that's that's easier said, and I think you're kind of skipping a step if you don't understand why you should sing open. And again, that's my understanding of it, and it changes every couple of weeks.
Definitely, yeah.
Because it's such a tricky part of it. But yeah, I mean, I think that you just need to adjust. You need to adapt to the situation, to adapt to the conditions which are changing. Like when you sing higher up in your register, the conditions are changing. There's a different air quality, there's a different sound quality. You have to do something, right? And again, 300 years of singing have sort of taught us, and through recordings we hear that there's just an opening and a covering of the vowel, right? Is that you can't really sing a very closed vowel. People do it, and Pavarotti definitely sounds like he does it sometimes. I don't think he does. I think he definitely has if you think of a water hose, the nozzle is tight, but everything behind it is open and flows freely, right? It's just the very tip of it.
Definitely.
So yeah,
definitely.
So you have to sing pare, but it's gonna sound like pare because it's a higher frequency, right? You're just readjusting to have more or less the same effect, but you have to change something.
Definitely.
I
I think you're explaining it extremely well and very eloquently. So obviously these are mystical concepts,
And they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be
Yeah.
because they're all real. I mean, I'm a big fan of. In my spare time, I read a lot and I watch a lot of things that pertain to physics, right? Just to how the world reacts in a mathematical and logical way. And singing is logical. There shouldn't be any magic to it. It's just that our experience of the world is really through our senses, and we have a lot of connection to the outside world because our skin and our eyes, we're very well equipped to deal with things that come at us. We suck at feeling what's inside us because there aren't a lot of nerve endings. Like sometimes if we swallow something, like we'll feel it in our esophagus, but we don't really feel that much of what's inside our body. We don't really feel unless it starts to hurt what's happening in our larynx. You can start it, and I think that's a lot of those exercises that Arthur would make us do, is to just work on those nerve endings, work on being more aware of what's happening in that part of your body. The difficulty of all this work is that we're dealing with a lot of we're working blind in a way, because we don't actually know what's happening. It's great to get a laryngoscopy and make some sounds to understand what the hell is happening, because if you like, I have a video of my larynx, of my vocal cords vibrating, and the synesthesia, I think is the word, right? Your visualization of the effort has nothing to do with the reality, right? You don't imagine, you don't see your larynx and your vocal cords vibrating the way they do. You don't equate that with the sound that's coming out. You equate it with the position of your tongue and your mouth and your lips. You don't think about the trumpet, like the instrument here.
Mm-hmm. It's difficult because we play an instrument that doesn't have keys. We've heard that before, but exactly what you were saying, and that's sort of what I meant by mystical. You phrase it much more eloquently.
No, it absolutely is mystical. Yeah. I think because despite the underlying reality and the fact that there is a science to it, we may be better suited to approach it from a mystical standpoint, and that's what a lot of teachers do. A lot of teachers are technical, but inherently, because we lack those tools to truly feel and see and know what's happening here, I think a lot of teachers get good results from just using metaphors and imagery. Arthur uses real estate images, like, well, you're in the penthouse of your building and you want to open the sunroof. And that's worked. Exactly. That's worked for me, because there's and I think that's another thing about synesthesia, right, is that we're very empathetic as beings, and I think we can definitely empathize with a concept and relate it to what we do, to muscles and to it's definitely two worlds, right? Like science and faith, really, or rather science and religions, that kind of like dichotomy, is that you're going from one empirical world to a more spiritual and mystical, less exact, but with good results nonetheless.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's hard to say what's better.
Yeah. So just the last thing I wanted to talk about, I feel like we're sort of moving up through your range, is just the extreme top. I feel like you went and you studied in Italy for a summer, and when you came back, you were singing some high C's and some high notes, some high B's and stuff, and it was like there's there's a lot of trust that goes into it. And that's why recording yourself and surrounding yourself with people that you trust, whose ears you trust, I think is important, because it's hard to know when you're doing it right. When the position is right, but I'm still working on the fullness of the sound, on the ability to do it after a whole aria, that kind of stuff. I think that after that summer, things went better because I had just started to figure it out, and there's definitely things are gradual, but the rate at which things progress
isn't always constant, right? When you get something, it's definitely an event where you suddenly have tools that you can work with. And during that summer, right before that summer, I had accumulated a few tools thanks to Arthur, where I forgot if it was a month or 2 months, but for that period of time, it's all I worked on. And I knew what I needed to work on. That's the difference, right? Is that you had time and you had enough knowledge to steer yourself in the right direction on your own. And there was like a lot of feedback from the people at Glenn Morton's program that had good ears and good feedback. Not all the time, but enough to keep me on the right track, more or less. And a lot of it was just doing it and getting used to it, understanding what needed to be done. And I can say that almost 2 years after, I'm still figuring it out, and I knew that I wasn't really thinking about everything that I should have been thinking about when singing high notes. Maybe it was better that way, though, because I just did it and I didn't think about it. Now I'm like fucking overthinking the shit out of it.
Yeah,
and less so. I mean, I'm getting better at it, and it partly thanks to this guy, actually, the guy who sings Radames. He definitely, what was I gonna say?
High notes.
Yeah, high notes. Sorry, my roommates just woke up, so.
That's okay. You were talking about just going for high notes, and the advice you were getting, and part of it was from.
Yeah, of just hearing him. No, I don't have it. I lost it.
Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I often tell my students, if you're gonna just dip your toe in the pool, you aren't gonna get it. You have to fully commit to it. It's like jumping off a high dive, swan diving. You can't you don't get the chance to test the waters, to feel the temperature. You have to just go for it. And if you're gonna make a big splash, and then we can work on decreasing type of a thing. And I think especially, specifically with this range, this is sort of what I talk about, and it's the only thing that's worked for me. I every time I just like tiptoe, I'm thinking of when I had to sing like the butterfly duet with all those A's, had to attempt the butterfly duet with all those A's. There was no way I was ready for that, and that's what I did. Every time I got to the A's, it was like, okay, is this right? And notice it, and it just became that thing. If I just had gone for it,
Well, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because yes, you do have to go for it, but it needs to be an informed Hail Mary.
Of course.
Go! Like you have to have some direction, right? To
from the correct position. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think that's kind of always a negotiating, like informing yourself enough that you can give everything you have, but have it be focused. I think that's what is so exciting, right, about good singers, is that it looks as if they're just throwing caution to the wind and being so generous in their sound and their acting, but they do have a channel, a nozzle that's honed and that's very polished. I think that's the thing that makes them unique, is that they're focusing their passion and all their efforts in a very technical channel.
Yeah, definitely. And then sort of the last thing I want to talk about is when you sing today, what are your technical thoughts that are occupying your mind as you sing today? When you're thinking technically, of course, you're trying not to think technically, but when you're working on your voice, I know you were talking about legato, keeping the vibrato through all of the notes, and breath support, but can you go into that specifically?
So right now what I'm working on is Edgardo's aria from Lucia fra poco.
It's toughy.
My God. And the hard part there is that it's I don't know, every time those arias, it's like Tamino's aria, but a half step higher, right? So you start with that same da-da, fra poco me dico pero, as opposed to these, right? It's just everything is moved up, right? And it's a small step, but it's a huge step, because then instead of going up to A flats, you're going up to A's, and then it's a very different aria in that the cadenzas at the end go up to B and B flat. That's a different hard part for me. I'm really working on incorporating notes like A flat. I think A flat I'm pretty good on at this point. Somehow Traviata still eludes me. De miei volenti is a weird aria where it doesn't go very high, but it's just a hard aria. Anyways, so what I'm trying to do is just sing A flats and A's the same way that I sing G's. Hopefully B flat one day like that. B's and C's, I think there's only one way to do it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe in like 10 years I won't think that way, but to me it's definitely like there's a point where in fra poco where you have or it's rispetto alle ceneri di mio and that's an A up there, and you've been doing like 3 minutes or 2 minutes of like steady passaggio singing, and how do you, after 2 minutes of singing in a very hard part of your voice, how do you still go up to A and then a minute later go up to B? And that's, so I'm trying to think less about those endpoints and thinking more about, in a very cliche way, I'm thinking more about the journey, right? How to stay legato, how to protect your voice in the passaggio, how to stay connected to your breath throughout the beginning of those arias. That's why I'm working on Celeste Aida just in the beginning, like how to not, crudely said, blow your wad on just the first G, like how do you not, and that's to go back to what Radames does. He just sings the G using his resonance and using his natural range. He's not making a big deal out of it in terms of effort. It's still beautiful, it's still connected, but he's keeping his energy for the stuff that everybody's kind of waiting for, right? My understanding of tenors of how to sing as a tenor has shifted in the past year, where before, when I would look at a piece, I would be like, oh shit, here comes the G, and that's still kind of some baggage that I have left over, where when I see, like, for that Edgardo's aria gets to a G in the first, like, in the second measure, but it's not a high note. It's just it's a normal range thing. And I think you could even say that A flat is also a normal range for a tenor. Shouldn't be seen as a high note unless it's treated as a high note. Where, for example, in La Paterna Mano, it's a high note there, but like in higher Donizetti, it's not. So the difficulty, I guess, is having a constant, which is the note, but then having your approach, which has to change depending on the context of the piece.
Definitely, that was a big thing. A big point that Arthur made to me as well when I was studying with him was, this A flat's not going to feel like this A flat.
Absolutely, and I didn't really get that until like a couple months ago. I mean, you understand things conceptually and theoretically. It takes a while to know really what people mean until you've really like done it for yourself, until you've really felt it, until you've really come across that difficulty and overcome it. I don't know. It's hard. It's a hard choice. It's a hard career. It's a hard voice type. Tenors are weird because they take a while to mature. Some of them don't. Some of them are ready pretty soon. I'm definitely in the latter, in the former group where it's gonna take a while for me to be completely, and maybe not. Maybe I am getting better and better, but I definitely can't. I don't know. I've been sick for 3 weeks, and I've been wanting to like just tackle these things that I think I can do. Now that I have accumulated all this knowledge, and I just really want to put it to work. In pieces that are maybe a bit too difficult for me, but I don't know. It's just you as you said, you kind of do need to take a leap of faith sometimes. That's again like what they kind of have us do here. They make us sing rap that we shouldn't be singing according to a lot of people, but you know, like it's a safe environment, and if you're doing it technically correctly, then you know it shouldn't be a problem.
So are they assigning solo rep to you? You do like scenes, concerts, and
so we have
stuff like that?
Absolutely. We do scenes. We have some master classes. Right now we're super busy, but actually once the season gets started and we've staged and you know done all the when all the operas are up and running, then we'll be doing a lot more individual work. Right now everything just needs to be up and running.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So, how did the audition season go for you this year? Did you?
Not that well. I mean, I'm going to Caramoor.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I think I did see that on your announcement. Yeah, you made an announcement for that.
I don't think
or
so.
Did you not? Oh, okay.
Not yet.
I'm thinking of.
Sarasota probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it's no. I think it'll be good. I'm actually happy to be in New York, with my girlfriend, because right now I'm like 3 months away. I mean, you were the king of long distance relationships for 2 years, so I have nothing.
That's like No. I feel your pain. Trust me. So.
But no, I'm happy to be in New York. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say is that one of my more formative experiences was recently when I did Don Giovanni in Virginia with a small opera company with Shawn and Emily Mish and and that was great. I did Don Ottavio, and that was hard. It was super hard, but it was good, because again, like being confronted to the reality of things, you start to make adjustments on the fly. I'm pretty sure the morning of the premiere of the first performance, I understood something technically that I had been trying to figure out for months. I was like, oh, just do that. And it was something to do with breath control, basically, with legato, with having the vibrato really always be consistent. I mean, I don't know, we're talking about legato, we're talking about vibrato, we're talking about breath control. To me, they're the same thing.
Exactly, yeah.
It's an anchor. It's always being connected to your abdominal
sort of
muscles.
Like, yeah.
So that
I see vibrato as like
here.
Yeah, exactly. I see vibrato as sort of like an insurance.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It's like an insurance policy of if this is going, then you know that the other stuff's working, and vice versa. It's like, you know, the triangle.
The triangle.
No matter which way you look at it, it's like they're insurance policies for the other, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So definitely definitely like the performing a role is the big next step in general for singers. It's just having to deal with stamina, having to deal with an aria in its context rather than taken out of context like we do in the beginning.
So that was my interview with Shawn, this week's Young Artist's Perspective. I really enjoyed everything he had to say. It was such a pleasure to really, someone who's doing so much good in their performing and specifically their singing technique, to understand, how much, in the process never really ends. You're always working to improve in every little way that you can. And this journey to become, a prestigious or an opera singer singing on the finest stages and the largest concert halls is really a lifelong journey. And I think it's those that have the tenacity and accept that they have to be in the mindset of always thinking about these things while still being able to perform as an artist are the ones who are going to be successful. And it's always great to hear young artists who are so eager to get that break for their career. So be sure to let Shawn know what you thought of this episode. You can visit him on his website, tenorshawnchristensen.com, and there you can find links to his Facebook page, his SoundCloud and YouTube channels, where you can also listen to. He has many other recordings up there, and you can leave reviews and comments up there for him as well. Be sure to visit our website, voicetalks.org, and leave us a review for this episode, please. And whenever you give a shout out to Shawn, use the hashtag VoiceTalks so he knows you listened to the interview and what you thought of it. You can also donate to this project on our website or by visiting patreon.com/voicetalks. Just $1 or $2 helps keep this project going. I have monthly subscription fees, as well as making sure we have high quality mics so that the quality of the interviews are pleasant to listen to and not grainy, and through iPhone recordings recording a computer through Skype and things like that. That's just terrible audio quality. So I want to bring you the highest quality for this project and to give you all access to that and keep this an ongoing thing if you see its value. There are many more singers I'd love to interview. I have a really long list that I'm getting around to slowly. So thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening and subscribing to this podcast and leaving reviews. And I hope you enjoyed it. This is Zach, your host, bringing you another young artist's perspective.